London. The Palladium. 1959. She walks out and the room stops breathing. Not because of the dress, though the dress is impossible. Ivory satin, a fortune in fabric, hugging a body she has always treated as a weapon. Not because of the diamonds, though the diamonds catch the stage light and fracture it into 100 directions. The room stops breathing because she opens her mouth before the orchestra even finds its first note, and she says, into the microphone, into the silence of 1,500 people who came from money and kept it quiet. There is only one queen in this room, and she is standing in front of you. Pause. Then the house comes down. 3 standing ovations. 3 times they call her back. 3 times she returns to that stage like she never left. Like the wings of the London Palladium are her personal dressing room. Like she owns every square inch of this country she has never lived in. The British press will call her electrifying. They will call her magnetic. They will reach for every word except the true one, which is terrifying. She is terrifying the way a storm is terrifying. Not because it wants to hurt you, but because it does not know you are there. She is 35 years old. She has been married 5 times. She has 2 sons she does not raise. She carries a pistol in her handbag and a bottle of pills in her coat pocket. And neither of these things is unusual, and both of them will matter later. She has 4 years left to live. Go back. Go back to the beginning, to Alabama, 1924, to a world that does not know what it has just made. Her name is Ruth Lee Jones. Her father, a man history barely bothers to name, disappears before she is old enough to understand what disappearing means. Her mother, Alice, stays. Alice always stays. Alice is 5 feet of certainty and scripture, and Sunday morning, the kind of woman who believes that God is watching and that you had better act accordingly. When Ruth is 4 years old, Alice packs what they have and moves north to Chicago, to the South Side neighborhood they call Bronzeville, though some call it the Black Belt, and some call it a ghetto, and some call it home, and all of them are right. Bronzeville in the late 1920s is a city inside a city. It has its own newspapers, its own theaters, its own economy built on the edges of what white Chicago will permit. It has the Regal Theater and the Savoy Ballroom and a church on every other corner, and it has noise, beautiful, layered, competing noise, jazz bleeding through apartment walls, gospel pouring out of open windows on Sunday mornings, the street preachers and the numbers runners and the women in their good coats walking to choir practice. Ruth finds her voice in a church. She is this small. People cannot believe the sound coming out of her. Thomas A. Dorsey runs the choir at Pilgrim Baptist Church, and Dorsey is not a small figure. He is the man who is inventing gospel music in real time, who will one day be called the father of gospel, who takes the blues structure and the Baptist tradition and makes them into something that can split a congregation open with feeling. Ruth sings under him, and she is extraordinary, and everybody knows it, and Alice knows it. And Alice believes this gift belongs to God. But at night, when Alice is asleep, Ruth listens to records. Billie Holiday, Bessie Smith. Women who take the same feeling that lives in gospel, that bottomless human ache, and aim it somewhere different. Not at heaven, at the person who left you, at the rent you cannot pay, at the particular cruelty of being alive and wanting things. There is a moment in the kitchen. Ruth is maybe 12, 13. She is singing something she heard on the radio, something with a blues structure, something that is not a hymn. Alice walks in. Alice hears it. She does not shout. She does not hit. She just looks at her daughter with an expression Ruth will spend the rest of her life trying to read, and says nothing and leaves the room. That silence between them never fully closes. 18 years old. Chicago. An audition. Lionel Hampton's orchestra is the most exciting big band in America at this particular moment, and Hampton is holding auditions, and Ruth Jones gets herself into that room. What happens next depends on who is telling the story, but every version agrees on the essential fact. She sings, and everyone in the room stops what they are doing. Hampton does not hesitate. He gives her a new name, the name of a president's wife, married to a jazz singer's first name, something that sounds like authority and beauty at the same time. Dinah Washington. She will keep this name for the rest of her life. She will become this name. There will be a moment not far from now when the person who was Ruth Jones will be genuinely difficult to find, buried under the weight of who Dinah Washington had to be. Her first marriage happens around this time, to a man named John Young. She is 17. He is quiet and good and exactly wrong for her, and the marriage lasts less than a year. This is not particularly unusual for a musician in her circumstances. What is slightly unusual is the speed, the efficiency of the exit. No drama, no prolonged negotiation. She is already learning that the door swings both ways and that she is the one who decides when to walk through it. Mercury Records signs her. The records start coming. 1943. 1944. The war years when people want music that acknowledges grief without being destroyed by it. Her voice does this better than almost anyone alive. It is a voice that knows sorrow the way you know a relative, intimately, impatiently, with complicated love. The marriages pile up like evidence in a case against happiness. George Jenkins, her second husband, plays drums in her band. There is a son, George Jr. There is a divorce by 1947. Robert Grayson comes next, and there is another son, Robert Jr., and another departure. The pattern is becoming clear to everyone who watches her life from the outside, and the verdict from the outside is always the same. She is difficult, she is demanding, she is too much. This verdict does not interest her. Walter Buchanan lasts 3 weeks. The story, as it comes down, is that he left a suitcase by the door, or she put it there. The distinction seems to matter to people who were not in the room. Eddie Chamblee plays saxophone in her band, and their marriage has more heat and more public disaster than the previous 4 combined. She fires him from the band in the middle of a performance in front of an audience with the microphone still live. Whether this was rage or theater or both, nobody can say for certain. Both boys, George and Robert, are raised by Alice in Chicago. Dinah sends money. She sends houses eventually. She sends gifts at Christmas and calls when she remembers the time difference, which is not always. Once, after a triumphant night at the Palladium, she picks up a hotel telephone in London to call her sons in Chicago and realizes, partway through dialing, that she does not know when they go to bed. They are her children, and she does not know what time they sleep. She holds the phone for a moment. She puts it down. She orders room service and does not talk about this to anyone. 1959. What a difference a day makes. The producers want her to record a pop ballad with strings. She resists. She has spent 15 years building a reputation in jazz and blues, and a pop ballad with strings is, in her mind, a form of erasure, a way of sanding her down into something easier to market to people who are not her people. She argues. She loses. She records it. She hates it. The song reaches number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100. It wins a Grammy. It becomes the first recording by a black woman to cross over into the pop mainstream at that level, which is a sentence that sounds like triumph, and is also a sentence about what the mainstream was willing to accept, and on what terms. She accepts the Grammy. She stands at the podium and says something gracious. In the car on the way back to the hotel, she is quiet for a long time. Someone in the car, a musician, a friend, asks if she is happy. She thinks about the question with the seriousness it deserves. "I made something real," she says finally. "And they liked the version with the strings." Nobody laughs. Nobody is quite sure if they are supposed to. Outside the car window, the city moves past in the dark. Inside, the Queen of the Blues is trying to figure out what she just won. His name is Dick Lane, but nobody calls him Dick. They call him Night Train, after the song, the one that was playing in the locker room the first time he ran an interception, back so fast that his teammates stopped practicing and just watched. The name stuck the way nicknames stick to men who deserve them. Permanently, effortlessly, as if the person had been waiting their whole life for someone else to say what they already were. Night Train Lane plays cornerback for the Detroit Lions. He is 6 feet 1 inch of compressed velocity, 210 pounds, and he holds a record from 1952 that nobody in the National Football League has broken yet, and as of the night he meets Dinah Washington, shows no sign of ever breaking. 14 interceptions in a single season. 14 in 12 games. The math on that still makes defensive coordinators quietly sick. He is not a soft man. His childhood makes Bronzeville look comfortable. Raised in an orphanage in Texas after his mother died when he was a year old, found by a woman named Ella Lane, who took him in and gave him her name, and the closest thing to a home he had. He understands, in his body rather than his mind, what it means to have nothing and then have something, and to know the difference between the two. When he meets Dinah Washington, she is the most famous woman in any room she enters. He is, depending on the room, the most famous man. This is new for her. Every previous husband had been a musician, someone in her orbit, someone whose career existed in relation to hers, which meant that the relationship existed in relation to hers, which meant that eventually the resentment would build the way water builds behind a dam, slow and invisible, and then suddenly not invisible at all. Night Train Lane does not resent her. He has nothing to resent. He is, in his own world, exactly what she is in hers. She goes to his games and screams from the stands louder than anyone. This is reported in the Detroit papers as charming. People who know her understand it differently. She does not scream at his games because she is a dutiful wife. She screams because she has watched him move on a football field, and she understands, with the instinct of a performer, what she is watching. She screams the way she sings, fully, without holding anything in reserve, because holding back is a form of lying, and she has never been willing to lie about what moves her. He meets her in a parking lot after a show. The story is simple. He looks at her, not the way men usually look at her, which is with a kind of hungry appraisal, totaling up what she represents, but the way you look at someone you already know, which is strange because they have never met. He says, "You know I love you." Not "I think I could love you." Not "I'd like to get to know you." A statement of existing fact delivered without drama. The way you'd say the sky's that particular color tonight. She stares at him for a long moment. "You don't know me," she says. "I know enough," he says. She thinks about this. She has been known, in various ways, by 5 husbands. She has been known by audiences in every major city in America and half of Europe. She has been known by record executives and band leaders and reviewers, and the kind of men who tell you they love you and mean they love what you do for them. She can count on one hand the number of people who have looked at her the way Night Train Lane is looking at her right now, which is like she is a person rather than a phenomenon. She marries him in 1959. For the first time in her adult life, something that is not her career makes her feel large rather than small. People who know her in this period, musicians, road managers, the women who have traveled with her long enough to see past the performance, they all say the same thing, in different words. They say there was a quality to her in those last years that they had not seen before. Not happiness exactly, or not only happiness, something quieter, something that did not need an audience. The woman who had spent 20 years filling every room she entered with a sound discovers, at 35, that she can sit in a room with another person and not need to fill it. This is not a small thing. For Dinah Washington, this is enormous. 1963, the year America cracks open, June. Medgar Evers is shot in his driveway in Jackson, Mississippi, in front of his house, coming home from a meeting. He is 37 years old. September. A Sunday morning in Birmingham, Alabama. 16th Street Baptist Church. A bomb. 4 girls in the basement, putting on their choir robes, getting ready to sing. Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, Carol Denise McNair. The oldest is 14. The youngest is 11. August between these two things. 250,000 people on the Mall in Washington, and a man at a microphone saying, "I have a dream." Saying it like he means it. Like the dream is already half real. Like all it needs is enough people to believe it at the same time. November. Dallas. A motorcade. A shot. And then the country goes somewhere it has not been before. Somewhere without a name yet. Somewhere between grief and fury and a terrible disorientation. As if the ground has shifted and nobody can quite find their footing. Dinah Washington is in Detroit for all of this. She watches it on television, the way everyone watches it, in fragments, in disbelief, waiting for the news to correct itself. She has spent her career driving through the segregated South with a pistol in her handbag, refusing to perform for divided audiences, refusing to enter through service entrances, refusing at considerable personal cost to make herself smaller so that the towns she played in could feel more comfortable. She knows what this country is. She has always known. She keeps her engagements. She performs. The work does not stop because for Dinah Washington, the work has never stopped. Not for grief, not for marriage, not for heartbreak, not for the accumulated cost of being who she is in the world she was born into. The work is the one thing that has always been reliably hers. Friday, December the 13th, Detroit. There is no dramatic ending. This is one of the hardest things about what comes next. There is no dramatic ending. She does not perform that night. There is no fight, no crisis, no final scene that the people who loved her can point to and say, "There, that was the last real moment." It is an ordinary evening in December in Detroit, the kind of evening that does not know it is the last of anything. Night Train is there. They have dinner, they talk, or perhaps they sit in the comfortable silence of people who have learned that silence between them is not a problem to solve. She takes her medication before bed. Barbiturates, she has taken them for years, the way people in her world take them, the way the road takes everything from your body and the pills give some of it back. Sleep, at least. The approximation of rest. She goes to sleep. In the room, the particular darkness of a December night in Michigan, dense and cold outside the windows, the orange geometry of a streetlight on the ceiling, the sound of the city, which does not fully sleep. Night Train Lane beside her, his breathing slow and even. At some point during the night, the medication and her body reach an agreement that does not include continuing. It is not violent. It is not visible. It is the quietest possible end for a woman who was never quiet, and there is something about this that feels like one final contradiction in a life built from them. She is 39 years old. In the morning, Night Train Lane reaches for her and understands. The noise that follows is nothing like her. The funeral pulls thousands into the streets of Chicago. Tributes pour in from musicians who knew her and musicians who only knew her records and politicians who need to be seen saying the right thing. The press writes about her the way the press always wrote about her, reaching for the colorful details, the marriages, the temper, the extravagance, because the colorful details are easier to hold than the actual fact of who she was. Later, there are legal complications, financial complications, the bureaucratic indignity that follows most people who die without having organized their affairs for the convenience of the living. Her body is moved. There are disputes. None of this is worthy of her, and all of it is entirely predictable. Here is what is worthy of her. More than 400 recordings in 20 years. Jazz, blues, gospel, pop, country, rhythm, and blues. She refused to live in a single genre, which infuriated critics who needed a category and delighted everyone who simply listened. She recorded with orchestras and with small combos, and alone at a piano and with a full choir. She recorded songs about love, and songs about loss, and songs about love that was already lost before it started. She recorded late at night and early in the morning, and in the middle of sessions where she was the only person in the room who knew exactly what she wanted. She paid hospital bills for musicians who could not pay their own, quietly, without announcement. She cooked ribs for the entire band after shows, which is not a small thing when the band is 14 people, and you have just given everything you had on stage for 2 hours. She played poker, and she played to win, and she usually did, and the sidemen who lost their per diem to her did not seem to mind. She used a skin lightening cream, and this is painful to know, and it does not cancel anything else, but it lives in the record alongside everything else because people are not simple, and she was not simple, and she deserves a complicated account. She refused to perform for segregated audiences in the American South at a time when this refusal had real professional and personal consequences. She drove through those states anyway because the work required it, with a pistol in her bag because the work required that too. 7 husbands, 7 notes. The first, John Young, a whisper. The opening note of a song you are not yet sure you want to sing. The second, George Jenkins, louder, percussive, the note that tells you this is real music. The third, Robert Grayson, there and then not there, a note that drops out before the phrase is finished. The fourth, Walter Buchanan, 3 weeks, a grace note, decorative and structurally irrelevant. The fifth, Eddie Chambly, the sharpest and most jagged. The note that the player and the composer cannot agree on, beautiful for that reason, and impossible for that reason. The sixth, Rafael Campos. A different key entirely. A note from a different song played briefly in this one before moving on. And Night Train Lane. The seventh note. The one that arrives late in the composition, after you have almost stopped expecting resolution, and does not resolve anything. Does not need to. It is simply the truest note. The one that sounds like what the song was always trying to say. She was not a woman built for harmony. She was melody, self-sufficient, complete, and not requiring accompaniment to justify itself. That the melody ended at 39 is the wound that does not heal. Here is the true thing. The problem was never the men. The problem was never the pills or the temper or the marriages that lasted 3 weeks, or the children she sent money to instead of herself. Those are symptoms, and symptoms are not the disease. The disease, if you want to call it that, was this. She was born in Alabama in 1924, black, female, and more talented than the world she was born into had any framework for. There was no map for where she was going. Bessie Smith had gone there and died in a car accident, at 43 with the blues industry already done with her. Billie Holiday had gone there and been destroyed by the particular ways that the world destroys women who are too honest about their pain. Ethel Waters had found a way to survive by performing a version of herself that could be tolerated, and the cost of that was visible in her face every time she smiled on cue. Dinah Washington was not willing to perform a version of herself that could be tolerated. This is the thing the music carries. All of it. The gospel training and the Billie Holiday nights and the Mercury record sessions and the strings she hated and the Grammy she accepted. It all carries the same message, which is, I am here and I am exactly this, and you do not get to decide which parts of this are acceptable. The first people to go somewhere new pay full price. She knew this. She paid it. The room again, the ceiling, the light from outside. Except now there is only the light. The hands are gone. The laughter, and she laughed. She laughed hard, and often this is in the record too. The laughter is gone. The 7 marriage certificates. The signature on the Mercury contract. The handwriting on the check she sent to Chicago. The voice in the parking lot telling Night Train Lane that he did not know her. All of it gone. Except one thing. Someone. Somewhere. Tonight, tomorrow night, 50 years from tonight, puts on a record, or clicks a file, or asks a speaker in a quiet room to play something. And she begins. Not a ghost. Not a memory preserved in amber. She sings the way she always sang, which is like she is owed the world and has decided tonight to collect. The voice that Thomas Dorsey heard in a Chicago church, that Lionel Hampton heard at an audition, that 1,500 people heard in London in 1959 and forgot how to breathe. It comes through the speaker, and it fills the room, and it is as alive as anything in the room, more alive than most things. Find this bitter earth. Put it on. Turn it up to the volume it deserves. Close your eyes. The Queen gets the last word. She always did.